Okay, let me see if I can capture the question. Looking at this concept of multi-stakeholderism, and as it's presented here, multi-stakeholder governance, isn't it a misnomer really? Because there is no governance at the IGF. The IGF is not mandated for that purpose. Sub-question, should the IGF change its mandate to be a policy-setting organization, or has that ground been ceded to other organizations like the Council of Europe and others? Is that a fair summary of the question? Okay. And what are my thoughts on those issues? My thought on the policy side, and this is my personal reflection, is that no, the IGF should not be a policy-based organization. I take your point about the misnomer, but the IGF is a talk shop. Its mandate is that it happens every year. It doesn't produce any papers. It doesn't even produce a communique. And so a lot of people think, well, what's the point? You just get 1,600 people together in different locations around the world and have a nice time and drink some coffee and talk about stuff. Well, I think that's the point. And I return to that sort of notion of the steam release valve. You know, as long as this is in place, it's a bit, and I hesitate to make the comparison, it's a bit like Davos, okay? Nothing really happens there, but people get together and talk, and they do stuff, and they might make deals and then go back and then formalize them. And I think that the IGF is really, that's what it's about. It is a place where if you've got an idea, you can take it, you can test it. If you're a government and you want to get something done quietly, you can do that. So it is fulfilling its mandate, I think. And if it became a policy shop, then the cascade of questions that come to my mind about how that would be structured would just collapse on itself and I think kill the whole process. So I think it serves a very useful purpose by getting together governments and non-governmental actors in the same place to discuss the issues. If they've got follow-up, they can take it back and follow up remotely, and that's what it does. Has it ceded the policy ground? No, I think the area where that's going to happen is at the level of the ITU. I can't find that slide right now. But the ITU as an intergovernmental organization is pushing, they say they're not, but they're pushing for more say in the regulation of the internet, whatever that means, and we'll have to see. But as I said, that forum is, the parliamentary structure of that forum is such that no single government can control it. And therefore, what comes out of it is going to be like anything else that comes out of a committee. It's going to be a mishmash of stuff. Yeah.
Taking into account your observation that states being unwilling to seek sovereignty, level
Okay. The question was, given the reluctance of countries to cede sovereignty, what is my optimism for successful multi-stakeholder internet governance solutions? I would say I'm pretty, I'm more than agnostic about it. I'm pretty optimistic about it. The internet hasn't crashed yet. We haven't seen, I mean, I'm aware that some countries have tried to set up parallel nets that operate within their country, but we haven't seen a parallel global internet come up yet. I've heard some country representatives say we should actually drop the suite of IP protocols on which the internet runs right now and develop something new that they can control, but I haven't seen it yet. So, I mean, I think that, the thing is pretty robust. The thing works pretty well. I don't think with very few exceptions, I don't think anyone is really that interested in dismantling it. And I'll share with you one other thing that gives me some optimism here. And the relationship might seem a little obtuse to begin with, but the World Bank earlier this week issued a report about China, and I'm sure all of you downloaded it and read it. Basically, it was a report that was done in conjunction with a Chinese think tank. And the proposition was, what can we, China, do to go from middle GDP growth to accelerated GDP growth? And they were taking a very open look at it. This is a Chinese think tank means Chinese government, okay? So the Chinese government, working with the World Bank, was saying, what policies would we need to change to go from moderate growth to high growth? And they looked at a number of things, like becoming a real market economy. What would they conclude about changing some of their internet policies? The Chinese it's a huge market, huge internet market. The internet users there alone exceed our whole population in the United States. So it's something that really can't be ignored. But on the one hand, they love e-commerce, but they have a problem with some, what we would call political speech. So but the question is, if they change their view of those things, if they change their view of how they might restrict political speech, would it have a bigger impact on their economic growth? The fact that they were willing to look at those questions, I think, was enormously important. And so I am optimistic about it. I would have reasons to be pessimistic, but my time is running short, so.
Do you know, are there any plans to hold the IGF annual meetings in the United States?
Question was, are there plans to hold the IGF in the United States? The answer is, I don't know. I would guess not. That said, there is a US IGF, and I think there have been 2 of those. I think they've both been on the East Coast. So what typically happens is where the international meetings happen, there are these kind of regional planning meetings. So the Europeans were the first to do a regional Europe IGF. I mentioned the Pacific IGF that started about 2 years ago. The US IGF also started about 2 years ago. I would see no reason why not, but I'm just not aware that it's happening. Go ahead, George.
I would just suggest that there are visa issues. I involved with IETF, which has moved even most of its North American meetings to Canada because of visa issues with delegates from many of the countries.
Yeah, so George is pointing out that one of the practical difficulties of holding such a meeting here would be visa issues, and that's probably very true. I think we've got time for 1 or 2 more questions, if there are. Okay. So the question is, in the context of working with non-state actors, how would you work with an organization like Anonymous? Very good question. I wouldn't begin to know how to incent them to negotiate on something. It's just not, I don't think it's part of their DNA, I don't know that you would have to, necessarily. If you look at what has happened, I suppose, with WikiLeaks, I mean, to me, it's kind of a sad story in a way. But effectively, the organization has, been emasculated by going after one person. But I think there are other problems with that organization that, resulted in a sort of disintegration at the top. Anonymous, I don't know. I mean, I suppose the libertarians in the crowd might think it's a good idea to have organizations like that around to keep other organizations honest. And what would we gain from having them at the table anyway? Personal observation. Okay, one more? Or am I dismissed? One more. Okay, the question was, with respect to the work that the World Bank had done with China on looking at its growth trajectories, has the World Bank done anything in a broader scope on measuring economic impact of the internet and measuring economic impact of changing policies in certain areas so the internet can grow and flourish? And sadly, the answer is no, we haven't. We've done it in other kind of ICT, information and communication technologies, primarily in telecommunications. We've done it in fixed, mobile, and broadband telecommunications. We haven't done it in the internet yet. We are starting to look at this question of economic impact of cybercrime across our disciplines, because we do recognize it's an issue. On the broadband case, and this is the closest one, I think, we did do a very robust econometric study of the impact of broadband, deployment of broadband infrastructure, so over which the internet would run. And the study is now about 3 years old, and the sort of headline that came out of the study was that for every 10% of increase of broadband penetration, and I think we had a pretty low definition of what broadband was. For every 10% increase of broadband penetration, you get 1.38% cumulative growth in GDP. That usually makes ministers of finance open their eyes and get their jaw off the floor. I mean, that's a huge number. Where growth rates in countries are 4 or 5%, if you can, a 10% increase in broadband penetration bumps you up, 1.3, 1.38% in GDP. That's a pretty serious number, and it's cumulative. So if you have 20%, you get nearly 3% growth. So that's what we're trying to work on now in some of these other areas. We haven't, if you have ideas of how we could formulate such a study, I'd welcome hearing it. But the current work that we have is with respect to the economic impact of cybercrime. Okay, I think we have a few minutes left, so I'll turn the floor back over to John. Thank you very much.